friend, Mike Donnelly, from Washington, D.C. area, actually from West Virginia, to speak. Mike is the secretary of the Global Home Education Exchange Council and serves as the Global Outreach Director with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association of America, and is one of the tireless champions around the world, and a good friend. So Mike, welcome, and we look forward to your sharing. First things first, how can we help? That's a good question.
Well, Gerald, thank you. I'm not so sure I'm a tireless warrior. I'm getting old and the miles are starting to wear on me a little bit, but I certainly am tireless in my spirit and commitment to home education. As a homeschool dad, I have 7 children. My wife, Patty, and I have homeschooled our 7 children for going on 20 years now, and we still have 4 to graduate, 3 in college or graduated from college. It's a real privilege to serve the homeschool community. I'm so excited by the group of leaders we've been able to gather here today. And our goal here is to equip leaders in the homeschool community, and really every homeschooling family can exercise leadership at this time during this coronavirus pandemic, and support and reach out to those many millions of people who have never experienced this before. I'd like to share my screen here, and I'll run through a few slides with you. What we're talking about is helping struggling families and searching policymakers. And, when you talk about the impact of this coronavirus pandemic, the UNESCO organization estimates that 90% of all enrolled learners around the world have been affected with school closings. That's 1.5 billion with a B, 1.5 billion children have been affected, 191 countrywide school closures. What does that mean? Does that mean that everyone is homeschooling now? I know some of my fellow panelists are going to talk about that a little bit, but I want to just make a few points. Suddenly schooling at home, which is what the 1.5 billion people are now doing, is very different from what most people would think of as traditional homeschooling. And what is happening now is crisis management. You can call it coronavirus schooling, crisis schooling, but certainly it's not something that was done intentionally by most people. Most people are reacting to the fact that the schools are now closed. What people really need now is encouragement, not confusion. For homeschoolers around the world, well, I want to encourage you, leaders. Now's not the time necessarily to draw super hard lines in the sand about, oh, this is homeschooling, that's homeschooling. This is a time for us to reach out and help our neighbors, friends, fellow travelers on the planet Earth, how we can do this thing together. And we've just got a lot of experience because we've been doing it for a long time in the homeschooling community. They need support, not judgment. Now's not the time to say, you're not really homeschooling. You're suddenly schooling at home. The time for helping people make the transition from suddenly schooling at home or crisis schooling to real homeschooling is coming, though. But we got to support these folks who are struggling now with their children at home, balancing so many things. And what we need is a short-term and a long-term plan. People are in crisis mode right now, but many of them are tasting the joy of what homeschooling is, and they're going to want more. We're seeing that on social media. We're seeing that in many, many places. What's the impact? We have an immediate and long-term impact that we're dealing with as schools are shifting to distance learning, but over 50%, according to UNESCO, do not have access to technology or computers. And so distance learning is really not working for them. In Africa alone, 83% of all learners and people don't have access to distance learning. So that's not really a long-term solution. And even the UNESCO people say that it's not a long-term solution because face-to-face interaction is very important for the learning to happen. Some countries, about 191, have suspended all instruction, and parents, as I said, are struggling to balance work, survival, and education. Longer term, you're going to see some private schools, as a result of the loss in revenue from tuition, are going to fail. And public schools may remain closed depending on the curve of the coronavirus as it makes its way across the world, and there may be flare-ups. There's a significant economic impact that is coming, and it's going to have an impact on public school resources as well. And parents are going to face a decision point in the fall or spring, depending on which part of the globe you're on, north or south, when schools reopen. They're going to have a decision to make, which is whether they're going to send their child back to the public school or keep them at home, and there may not be a private school for them. So what do we need for education? For families, we need to help families. This is for leaders. What do we need to help families? We need to help families with a vision, with a mindset that learning isn't a place, that it can happen anywhere. We need to encourage the families. We need to help them understand that schooling at home can work. We've been doing this for decades, 60, 70 years of the modern homeschooling movement. The research shows that it works. And here's an opportunity to make the most of it. And Canute from Africa is going to talk about that later. mompossible.org is a website that we set up at HSLDA. I'm going to talk with you about that a little bit later. I'm having a little trouble with my keyboard here, sorry. Learning resources. You know, there's lots of resources out there, even in places that aren't resource constrained. And there's no need to replicate school at home. I think we need to tell people that homeschooling or even crisis schooling doesn't have to be an exact copy of the schedule of school at home. Learn Everywhere is a great resource online available to anybody with a Facebook account to get some support. And technology still allows for that support, as the minister said. We may be physically distanced, but there are still ways for us to make that connection. For policymakers, what leaders need to do is encourage policymakers to support innovation with less control. The more government gets out of the way, the more people can experiment with new things and try new things. Decentralized learning works. And when you decentralize to the family with parents who love their kids, are doing the best they can to guide them and find resources for them, that's going to produce really good things. Policymakers can support parents with resources and regulatory reform and trust parents. Parents can be trusted. You're seeing some bit of a flare up in the United States with a Harvard University article that basically said that you can't trust parents, that the government has to control all education and virtually no children should be homeschooled. And if you want to learn about that, you can just Google Harvard University Alumni Association and Elizabeth Bartholet. We need to seize the opportunity to see education in a new way and encourage policymakers to do that. Things cannot stay the same following this coronavirus pandemic, and this is an opportunity where we as a people all over the world have an opportunity to look at education differently. And freedom is a viable policy. We need to encourage those policymakers to embrace freedom for families to try this. Parents want to do what's best for their kids. That's what common sense and nature shows. And government should respect and protect this. HSLDA has produced a new website called mompossible.org with videos, downloads, and a mentoring application. And I'd just like to share that with you for just a minute, take a quick tour of it. And if I can get that on here just very, very quickly. Sorry, I had it up here and I must have closed it. I know we've gone through this quickly, but this is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to watch this if you want. Okay, so we're going to, hold on, share MomPossible, there it is. Okay, so mompossible.org is the website, and this is what it looks like very, very briefly. Just scroll down, there's a quiz. You know, the messaging is, really, it's mom oriented, although we know that it's not just moms who are doing the homeschooling, and dads are very important for homeschooling, but there's only so much you could do in a short period of time. We want people to be confident. We want to help them be confident in this crisis. We've got some videos for them, for working parents, helping people create stability, getting through June. We've got downloads for people to use, a working mom schedule, family table topics. We've got FAQs. And you can check out the Facebook group. There's a mentoring group. If you click on that, it'll take you to a Facebook mentoring group where experienced homeschool moms and others can connect with people who are trying to figure out what to do during this coronavirus crisis. So Gerald, thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you again to the panelists, and I'll turn it back over to you.
And Mike, thank you. That mompossible.org is fantastic and a great resource. Thank you to HSLDA US for producing that for certainly the US, but for around the world. Your leadership is so valuable. Thank you for that.